Chapter 1. The Dog Who Belonged to Everyone and No One. At the edge of Taos Pueblo, where the fields flattened themselves politely before rising into mountain shadow, there was a dog who belonged, depending on who you asked, to either no one at all or to everyone simultaneously. He was a medium-sized dog of unclear origin and shifting color, dusty brown when dry, a richer, almost respectable cinnamon when wet. His ears worked independently of one another, as if each had its own opinions. One stood up for authority, the other folded down in quiet dissent. People called him different things. Mateo called him Professor. Lila called him Don't You Dare. Old Tomas, who drove a black Cadillac SUV that gleamed like it had never met dirt, though it absolutely had, called him Thief, but without much conviction. The dog did not answer to any of these names, not because he was defiant, but because names seemed like an unnecessary level of commitment. He woke each morning wherever the night had negotiated him, a porch, the cool shadow of an orno, once memorably inside the open back of a pickup truck, where he had slept like a king among coiled ropes and a suspiciously soft bag of something that smelled like jerky, but was not, as it turned out, jerky. This particular morning, he rose from beneath a long log bridge that stretched over the narrow stream cutting through the village. The water moved steadily, whispering the same sentence over and over again, in a language no one fully translated, but everyone respected. The dog stretched, front paws extended, back legs trembling slightly with effort. He yawned wide enough to reveal a chipped tooth, souvenir of an incident involving a horse who had not appreciated curiosity. Across the stream, Mateo stood barefoot, holding a cup of coffee and staring into the distance like a man who had misplaced something intangible. You again, Mateo said. The dog wagged his tail once, cautiously. Mateo was a man who sometimes had tortillas and sometimes had opinions, and it was never clear which he would offer first. You're not supposed to be here this early, Mateo continued, as though the dog had a schedule he was ignoring. The dog tilted his head, ears negotiating. Mateo took a sip of coffee and squinted at him. You look like you've been thinking. That's never good. The dog barked once, short, declarative. He had, in fact, been thinking. Specifically, he had been thinking about the smell drifting from Lila's yard. Something roasted, something promising. Mateo followed the dog's gaze. Ah, her. They both stood in silence for a moment, united by appetite and mild suspicion. Don't get caught, Mateo said finally, turning back towards his house. She's in a mood. The dog did not know what a mood was, but he recognized the tone. It suggested risk. He crossed the log bridge with practiced ease, pausing halfway to look down at the water. Something flickered beneath the surface. A fish, perhaps, or just the idea of one. He leaned forward, curious, and for a brief moment, his back legs performed an anxious calculation. He recovered. Barely. On the far side, the red willows leaned toward him like conspirators. The wind moved through them in a way that felt intentional, as though it had something to say but preferred not to be quoted. Lila's yard was not fenced so much as it was implied. A few posts, a sagging wire, and the collective understanding that crossing into it came with consequences. The dog stepped lightly, placing each paw as though the earth might object. From inside the house, Lila's voice rang out. If that dog is out there, the dog froze. I swear to God. He took one careful step backward. The door opened with a sound that suggested finality. There you are, Lila said. The dog wagged his tail in a way that was both apologetic and optimistic. He lowered his head slightly, ears angled back. Not submission exactly, but an acknowledgement of her narrative. You think I don't see you? She continued, hands on hips. You think I don't know what you're after? The dog glanced, involuntarily, towards the roasting pan visible through the window. Lila followed his gaze. Oh, absolutely not. The dog sat down. It was a strategic move. Sitting suggested patience, humility, and the possibility of reform. It was, in many ways, his most effective argument. Lila narrowed her eyes. Don't you sit at me. He wagged his tail again, slower this time, as if to say, I'm open to negotiation. For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind shifted. A horse snorted somewhere in the distance. A truck passed, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled slowly over everything, as though the world were being gently powdered. Lila sighed. You're impossible, she said. The dog leaned forward slightly, hope flickering. Stay there, she added, pointing a finger. He stayed. Mostly. She disappeared inside, and the dog's entire body leaned towards the door, held in place by a fragile understanding of cause and effect. When she returned, she carried something small. Don't make this a habit, she said, tossing it toward him. He caught it mid-air, an impressive feat, considering he had not planned to, and retreated a few steps in to consume it with the seriousness of a ritual. It was, in fact, jerky, real jerky. As he chewed, Lila watched him, her expression softening in spite of herself. You're not staying, she said. The dog swallowed and looked at her. He did not move. They regarded one another in a silence that contained more conversation than either would admit. Finally, Lila shook her head and turned away. Just don't get in trouble today. The dog stood, stretched again, and trotted off, his tail lifting slightly higher than before. He had no intention of staying. But he also had no intention of leaving for good. It was the balance he maintained, always arriving, never quite belonging, and somehow always expected. By midday, he would find himself in trouble. This was less a prediction than a pattern. And the day, like the stream, was already in motion. Chapter 2. The Matter of the Cadillac and the Horse. By late afternoon, the dog had accumulated a series of small, questionable decisions that, when viewed collectively, began to resemble a larger, more concerning philosophy. It started with the horse. The horse belonged to no one in particular, which in Taos was a way of saying it belonged very specifically to someone who would not be offended if you asked. It stood near the acequia, flicking its tail with the quiet authority of a creature that understood both its size and its limitations. The dog approached with interest. Not aggression, not even enthusiasm, just interest. He circled once, then twice, his paws kicking up little bursts of dust that hung briefly in the air before settling back into the earth like reluctant participants. The horse turned its head slowly. It was not a creature that rushed into conclusions. The dog barked once, sharp, exploratory. The horse did not respond. Encouraged, the dog stepped closer, lowering his head, his body angled in a way that suggested curiosity over confrontation. He sniffed. The horse exhaled, a long, deliberate breath that carried with it a warning disguised as indifference. The dog, misinterpreting this entirely, wagged his tail. He moved closer, too close. What followed was not so much an attack as it was a correction, a swift, precise movement of the horse's leg, enough to make contact, enough to communicate, but not enough to escalate. The dog yelped and jumped back, his body folding in on itself for a moment before reassembling. He stood still, processing, Then, in a gesture that was either bravery or profound misunderstanding, he barked again. The horse turned away. Conversation over. The dog limped slightly as he retreated, his pride more affected than his body. He paused at the edge of the acequia, lowering his head to drink. The water was cold, clean, and entirely uninterested in his recent humiliation. Across the field, a black Cadillac SUV approached, its surface reflecting the sky in a way that felt almost excessive. Old Tomas drove with the careful intensity of a man who believed the road might change its mind at any moment. The dog watched. The Cadillac slowed. Tomas rolled down the window. "There you are," he said. "I was looking for you." This was unlikely. The dog took a cautious step backward. "Don't act like you don't remember," Thomas said. "The jerky." The dog froze. Memory, in his case, was less record and more a series of smells arranged in approximate order. Jerky had a very distinct place in that system. "You took it," Thomas said. The dog wagged his tail tentatively. "Yes, exactly like that," Thomas said. "Guilty." The dog shifted his weight, his back leg still slightly tender. He glanced toward the willows, calculating distance. "Get in," Thomas said, opening the passenger door. The dog did not move. "I'm not asking," Thomas added. The dog took a step forward, then another. The open door presented an opportunity, a risk, and a surface that smelled faintly of leather and something chemical. He placed one paw inside, then another. Soon he was seated, his body tense, his eyes wide. Tomas nodded. "See, that wasn't so hard." The door closed with a finality the dog did not appreciate. They drove. The village moved past them in slow, familiar frames. The hornos, the bridges, the people who paused to watch the Cadillac with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. Inside the car, the dog shifted, his nails clicking softly against the floor. He glanced at Tomas, then at the window, then back again. "You're fine," Tomas said. "Relax." The dog did not relax. Instead, he began to pant, his breath quick and shallow. His body leaned slightly toward the door, as though proximity might translate into escape. "Don't start," Tomas said. The dog let out a low whimper. "Don't you dare," Tomas added. The whimper escalated into a soft, continuous sound that suggested both distress and accusation. Tomas sighed. "You're the most dramatic animal I've ever met." The dog shifted again, his paw pressing against the door handle in a way that was, at first, accidental, then less so. There was a click. The door opened. Not fully, just enough. The dog did not hesitate. He launched himself out of the moving vehicle with a kind of commitment that bypasses reason entirely. For a brief moment, he existed in a space between decisions. Then he hit the ground. He rolled, dust rising around him in a cloud that obscured the specifics of his landing. The Cadillac braked hard, tires protesting. Tomas leaned out the window. "Are you insane?" The dog stood, shook himself vigorously, and looked back at the car. He wagged his tail. Once. Then he turned and ran. Across the field, over the log bridge, past the red willows that whispered nothing helpful at all. Behind him, Tomas's voice carried on the wind. "You're paying for that." The dog did not know what that meant, but he knew with absolute certainty that he was no longer in the car. This, for the moment, was enough. Chapter 3. A Place to Land. By evening, the light softened into something almost forgiving. The mountains held the last of the sun, like a secret they were not ready to share, and the fields settled into a quiet that felt earned. The dog moved more slowly now. The day had taken something from him. Not dramatically, not irreversibly, but enough to be noticed. His limp had returned, subtle but persistent. His breathing had steadied, but there was a caution in it, as though he had learned something he could not quite articulate. He crossed the log bridge again, pausing halfway as he had that morning. The stream moved as it always did, unchanged, unimpressed. He looked down, then away. On the far side, the village carried on in its particular way, voices drifting, doors opening and closing, the occasional bark of another dog who had made different choices and was now announcing them. Mateo sat outside his house, the same cup in his hand, though it had likely been refilled. "Well," Mateo said, as the dog approached, "you look worse." The dog lowered his head slightly, his tail moving in a slow, uncertain rhythm. "Let me guess," Mateo continued. "Horse?" The dog blinked. "And Tomas?" Mateo added. The dog sat down. "Of course, Tomas," Mateo said. "You can't stay out of that man's life." The dog let out a small huff, somewhere between a sigh and a complaint. Mateo studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the space beside him. "Come here." The dog hesitated. This was new. Not the invitation, but the tone. He stepped forward carefully and lowered himself onto the cool ground. Mateo reached out, his hand moving slowly, giving the dog time to object. The dog did not object. The hand settled on his head, fingers pressing gently into the fur, finding the places that held tension. "Idiot," Mateo said softly. The dog closed his eyes. For a moment, the world narrowed to this: touch, warmth, the steady rhythm of Mateo's breathing. "You don't belong to anyone," Mateo continued. "That's your whole thing." The dog's ear flicked. "But you can't just..." Mateo paused, searching for a word he did not entirely believe in. "Float." The dog opened one eye. Mateo sighed. "Actually, you probably can." They sat in silence. A truck passed slower this time. In the distance, a horse shifted its weight, the sound carrying faintly across the fields. The willows moved again, their quiet conversation ongoing. From across the way, Lila's voice called out, "Is he with you?" Mateo did not look up. "He's with me," he replied. "He's near me." Lila appeared, hands on hips, her expression already prepared for disapproval. "There you are," she said to the dog. The dog lifted his head, his tail giving a small, cautious wag. "You look terrible," she added. The dog stood, took a few tentative steps towards her, then paused, as if remembering the day. Lila's expression shifted. "Come here," she said, softer now. He went, slowly, carefully. She crouched down, examining him with a focus that bordered on accusation. "What did you do?" she asked. He looked away. "Exactly," she said. She reached out, her hands moving over him, checking for injuries, her touch firm but not unkind. "You're lucky," she muttered. The dog leaned into her hand, just slightly. Mateo watched, his expression unreadable. "You're not keeping him," he said. "I'm not keeping him," Lila replied. They both looked at the dog. The dog looked back. For a moment, it seemed as though a decision might be made. Something clear, something final. Instead, the dog sat down between them, not with Mateo, not with Lila, between. His tail settled around his paws, his ears adjusted, one up, one down, as always. He exhaled, long and slow. The day had been, by most standards, a failure. He had been kicked by a horse, ejected from a vehicle, and scolded by multiple authorities. And yet, here he was, not owned, not lost, not entirely alone. Lila stood up. "He can stay tonight," she said. Mateo shrugged. He was never leaving. The dog did not move. The sky darkened, the first stars appearing with the quiet confidence of things that know they will be seen. Somewhere a door closed. Somewhere else it opened. The dog remained where he was, suspended in that space between belonging and freedom, where every day ended up the same way, with a place to land, even if only for a night. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow would come. It always did. And with it, the possibility of better decisions, or worse ones. Either way, there would be fields and water, and voices calling his many names. And he would answer, in the only ways he knew how.